Hey, good morning. Welcome back to Central Ontario. It's another beautiful day. We have had a crazy heat wave for the last week, and I think the Northeast US has been getting it as well. So it's kind of slowed me down a little bit. I haven't done much of my chores the last week, but I got to get a few things done over the next couple of days. I got to get the tractor into the back clearing and drag that boat out and clean it up and get it in the water. My daughter's got a bunch of friends coming up next week, so I guess I got to get the place ready. Finally going to get to grading that back driveway as well, because it's been dried out enough here long enough, so I think I'm in good shape. But today I just wanted to focus on the chainsaw. As you've probably noticed the last couple of weeks, I've had a few videos out where I've taken down a few trees or blocked them up. And you probably noticed I'm very new to chainsaws. I haven't been doing it all my life. And so this video is just to kind of share some of the things that I've learned or the things that I've experienced, hopefully for some other chainsaw newbies like myself. And if you're an experienced chainsaw user, or you've been using it all your life, I'd love you to watch and love to see some comments or advice at the end. So grab a coffee, stick around if you've got the time, and let's take a look at the chainsaw together. Cheers. So you probably saw that I cut down that last cherry tree last week. I think that was video number 51, and about a week or two before that, I think around 47 or 48, I cut down another cherry tree, and previous to that you've seen me cutting wood here and there in the property. And sure enough, I figured I was done with the chainsaw for a while until I drove out the next day and found a big huge poplar tree bent over and the limbs hanging into the driveway. So we're going to have to look after that today. I'm not going to take the whole tree down, but I'm going to cut those limbs out, at least to clear the driveway to make sure that everybody can get through okay. But what I wanted to do today is just share some of my experiences. As you know, I'm not an expert. I'm in my 50s, and I literally have never touched a chainsaw or used a chainsaw most of my life until about 7 years ago. It's the first time I got a chainsaw, so what I've learned very quickly is it's a skill using this chainsaw. It's a pretty powerful piece of equipment, and the manual you get gives you some general instructions, but really experience and use and safety. Over time, you eventually start to use it well, and what's really nice is on the channel I've got a lot of great subscribers, plus I've got a neighbor guy who's been, felling trees most of his life. So between the two of them, I've been slowly learning and getting experience as to how to use this the right way and how to use it safely. So stick around, let's go through this thing, and I want to go through a few topics, especially for guys like myself that have only been doing it a few years, and hopefully it'll be beneficial. So first and foremost, let's talk about what chainsaw you need. Probably like many of you, very recent after I got this property, one day I drove down the driveway, and as you know, I've got about almost a mile-long driveway through the forest, and sure enough, I'm facing a tree down on the driveway, and I have never had a chainsaw in my life. So luckily I had an axe, so I did it the old-fashioned way, a little Paul Bunyan, cut her up, threw a rope around it, and used the truck to try to pull it far enough off the driveway that I could weave my way through, but then definitely realized I had to get a chainsaw. So unfortunately I did not have the time to research and try to figure out what I needed, and I didn't know a lot about chainsaws, so I went to my big box store, Lowe's, Home Depot, Rona, and looked at all the chainsaws they had and found one that was on sale that was a reasonable price, because it was an unexpected expense. Unfortunately, of course, as you probably have already figured out, I ended up buying like a garden chainsaw. And you'll very quickly learn, if you have property, or if you're new with property and a tractor and you're starting to get your equipment ready to look after your property, that when you have 4 or 5 or more acres of wood, a garden chainsaw is not what you need, because it's not going to do the job. So it didn't take me long to figure that out. It was a good unit, but it just, what I've learned since, of course, is that there are different size and types of chainsaws for different applications. And what you have to figure out when you do your research is what kind of property you have, how much you're going to use it, what type of things or trees, or what you're going to do with that chainsaw. And if possible, if you've got a local guy or somebody close by that is a chainsaw expert, and we happen to have one called the Chainsaw Clinic, great people, they've been around for like 60 years or something, and they know everything there is to know about different types of chainsaws. You need to make sure you get the right one for you, because otherwise it becomes just a wasted expense, because you're going to end up buying the right chainsaw for you anyways. I picked this thing up afterwards. It's a 251C, it's a STIHL unit, I liked it a lot because I think it does the job. I mean, there's times when I'm, trying to get through a 20-inch maple and it takes a little while, but it's got a lot of power and it's super lightweight, and that's why I bought it. Because after you're spending a few hours in the forest, you start to get a little bit fatigued in the forearms from dragging around a 15 or 20-pound chainsaw. It's a great unit. I'm going to go through it with you a little bit, things I've learned or things I've learned from my subscribers or my neighbor as to how to use it, and then we're going to take it up the driveway and we're going to see what's going on with that poplar that's down, see if we can cut off those branches and get it cleared. The second thing I want to talk about is safety. Made a couple of stupid errors myself, and I'm just as guilty of it, but you spend some money on a chainsaw, you've already spent a lot of dough, you see all the protection equipment and the safety equipment around, but you're like, okay, well, I really only need to protect my eyes. So what do? You buy some eye protection. So you pick up a pair of protective eyeglasses, and sure enough, whether it's summer or winter, you'll find out very quickly that whether it's really hot or really cold, those glasses are going to fog up in no time. And then you're out there trying to use the chainsaw, and you're forced to either not see clearly while you're doing it or take the glasses off. And sooner or later you get to a point where you realize, after a couple of close calls, which I don't want to mention on the camera, but I've had a few, that you clearly need to make sure you have the right protective equipment for the job, especially if you got a family and stuff. It probably is going to be a difficult discussion trying to explain to your family why you've lost a limb or you've hurt yourself permanently because you didn't spend a little extra money to get the right equipment for the job. So what do you need? You got to make sure you've got protection. This unit here I bought this year after I had the safety glasses and I realized that that was just not working. Really nice unit, and there's different brands, but what I like about it, it's got the hard hat, because you're going to find when you're out in the forest that limbs are going to fall. And they may come really close to you or they may end up hitting you, but you need to make sure you have the right equipment. This one here has a full visor down. Sometimes they come with a visor about halfway, but either way, it's great because it keeps the chips out of your face, but it also, if you get the longer one, I found it keeps the bugs and the black flies from getting in behind and trying to bite you in the face while you're trying to chainsaw. Has the earmuffs on it, and it's adjustable in the back for your head size, so it's a very comfortable helmet. You don't even realize you have it on after you've connected it on and you've tightened it up behind your head. Second thing, you've got to have protective pants, and I went for a long time without it. Funny thing, my neighbor Guy, whenever I go over to his acreage and we're cutting up wood over the last 2 years, he always makes me wear his pants because he has an extra pair. Last couple of safety tips. Make sure you have a really good pair of good leather gloves to protect your hands, not only when using it, but you're working around wood. You've got a power tool, good to keep your hands protected and confident. Footwear, make sure you have a good pair of work boots on, steel shank, steel toe, green patch. Gives you good firm footing when you're in the forest and working around trees. And the last thing that I've learned from my neighbor Guy, make sure you have an escape route. So before you start cutting, once you get an idea of where you're going to cut and where you're going to stand around the tree, take a look around you and figure out that if something went wrong, where are you going to run? And then once you figure that out, make sure you clear the path. So if you've got old logs or debris sitting in the way, take a few minutes, just clear all that out of the way so that you make sure that you're able to make a run for it if you have to, and you're not going to end up turning and starting to run and tripping over a log with a live chainsaw in your hand. All right, let's talk about the chainsaw itself and the use of the chainsaw and things I've learned. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you, as I've learned over the last few years, I'm getting a little better at it, but you probably are similar to me, new to chainsaws. You bought your chainsaw, you get out there, you start cutting wood, and that thing is slicing through the wood like butter. And it's going great, and you do the next tree and maybe the next one if you're lucky, and at some point you realize it's not going through as easy as it used to, and you can't figure out why. And you're trying to force it, and as you're trying to force it, you're putting pressure on this front bar, and you're trying to dig it through the wood, and you can't figure out why, and then all of a sudden you realize that maybe you need to sharpen it. Well, all I can tell you is, from my perspective, sharpening is definitely got to be an art form, because I've tried many times with the files, and you try to file it, and if you don't get it just right, it doesn't really help much. And at one point, I remember once I just got in the truck and went to the hardware store and bought a new chain. And over time, I've learned that it's not easy to learn how to sharpen these things and to sharpen them the right way. Not to mention, as you know, there's these little things they call rakes, or they're basically depth gauges, so to speak, and they're between the teeth, or the cutting edges. And you've got to make sure that they're at the right level too, because if you leave them too high, even though you've sharpened your cutters, it's not going to be able to cut the wood because it's riding on these little rakes. And if you cut them too low, even though you've sharpened the cutters are trying to take too much, and that bogs it down as well. So you'll also find that if your chainsaw is not sharpened properly, it overheats pretty quickly and you start seeing smoke coming off the bar while you're cutting through the wood. So another thing that tells you whether your chainsaw is properly sharpened and it's working well is, as I mentioned, when it was brand new and you took it to the first log you took it to, you grabbed your chainsaw, you fired it up, you took the teeth, you put her into the side of the bark, and you started to do your arc, or you started to move down with it. And it cut right through like butter. And what you'll find is when it's not sharpened, you're in a position, as I mentioned before, where you're forcing it. The other thing that'll give you a big sign is if you look out the back of the chainsaw, if it's sharpened properly, you're going to see chips of wood flying out the back. If it's not sharpened properly, you'll start seeing sawdust coming out the back. And it's a very distinct difference. You'll be able to tell right away. In fact, a couple of my subscribers watched the last video, and they could tell just by watching the video that there was sawdust coming out of the back of the machine and not chips. And they were right, absolutely right. I actually thought it was the rot in the wood as well. So what I finally ended up doing just recently is I bought one of these 2-in-1 sharpeners for dummies, or sharpeners for guys like me, because apparently this thing is going to do the rake as well as do the cutter and make sure that they're at the right level for each other to make sure you get a good cut. So I'm hoping this thing's going to work because we're going to try it out today after I've used it. And if it does, then I think I found my answer and saved myself from buying some new chains. Okay, another point with the chainsaw, your chain needs to be taut against the bar. It shouldn't be too loose. So if you're pulling it and you can barely get the bottom of the chain up off to the top of the bar and you let go and it snaps back, that's probably a good indicator that your tension on the chain is enough. You don't want it so tight that you can't pull it at all, and you certainly don't want it so loose that you could pull it right up, right out of the bar without problems and it doesn't snap back very quick. Because if you have a loose chain, which I've had a few times because I'm just learning how to tighten it, as you're going through a piece of wood, as soon as you catch a notch or something, the chain will literally fly off the bar. And it's a little bit, little disconcerting when it happens, but no injuries, so all good. So if you've taken a look at the last couple of trees that I've taken down, I did my first notch and I think it was a little too shallow and my angles were off, and then I did my second notch on the second tree, and that one I think I went too deep into the tree, although I think the notch itself was pretty good. But either way, when I went to do my back cut to create the hinge, they call it, in both cases the tree fell on its own. So in all fairness, in all honesty, I didn't control the fall, and I think part of the skill of doing this is making sure that you cut the tree in such a way that when you're ready for it to fall, you can make it fall, as opposed to having it fall without notice. And that's why you'll see in both those videos I made a run for the forest, because I was still cutting it and the thing started falling on me. If you're similar to me, you're probably learning from all kinds of different people, and some people tell you to put a notch, a 45 and a 45 for the notch. Some people say do a 90 and a 45. Some people say do a 30 and a 60. And then as far as creating the hinge, some people are saying create it 1 inch above where your notches meet, or the apex of your notch. Some people say 2 or 3 inches. Some people say put the notch 1/3 into the tree. Some people say 25% into the tree. So basically you're taking all this information and you're trying to figure out what works for you, and as you cut each tree you'll get better at it. But you've got a number of different perspectives as to how to create that notch, because it's so critical. That notch is going to determine where your tree falls. It's also going to determine how well you're able to control where it falls, or how it falls and when it falls. Because you want to stay safe, and the last thing you want is that thing to snap or buck or kick back at you while you're trying to cut it with a live chainsaw, and you've got to try to make a run into the forest. So I've been very fortunate because I have a lot of subscribers that clearly have a lot of experience cutting trees, and as well as my neighbors. So you can see those comments on the videos that I've just recently posted with the cherry trees. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do is just keep trying to get better at it. You might be like me, I'm a little bit visually challenged. I don't have very good depth perception, so when I'm standing around a tree, it's difficult for me to figure out what level is, or level to the horizon, as people say. So what I've picked up doing is I've grabbed some of this marker paint, and what I did on the last tree, as you'll see, is I actually walked back onto level ground, got a feel for what I thought was level, and then I walked directly to the tree and I drew a 90-degree or a perpendicular line across the trunk of the tree, so that at least while I was standing beside it, I had that reference point. And then what I also did is, where I wanted the tree to fall, I went back, stood there, looked at the tree, walked over, and I took the marker paint and I did a vertical line through the first line that I did, so that at least I can keep that perspective while I'm trying to cut the tree. Also got a great tip from one of the subscribers who mentioned that on the chainsaw there should be a perpendicular line somewhere on the side of the chainsaw to help you line up the direction of where you're cutting as to where it's going to fall. And the only thing I can find on this one is I'm assuming it's this line right here, which makes sense to me because as I'm cutting, I guess I'm able to line this line up with the direction of where I'm trying to cut my notch. And the last thing I want to talk about before we head up the driveway and cut those limbs off of that poplar is maintenance. Just like any tool you own, when you spend a lot of money on a tool, you got to keep it maintained. I mean, in all fairness, a good maintained piece of equipment will last you forever, as well as it'll operate efficiently. So I've always cleaned this thing after every time I use it, because you'll be surprised how much debris and dust and chips and things get caught up into your casing where your motor is. And while you're cleaning it, you also have to make sure that you take the thing apart, take the chain off and your bar, and make sure you clean out the inside of the bar where the chain rides, because you'll get a lot of gunk built up in there, because you know your oil is in there, as well as if you're creating sawdust or chips, they get in there and that's going to impede the ability for the chain to flow. They have a tool for that, so if you pick one up, that's great. I myself, I just use one of these tiny screwdrivers and I just put it in there and I can just clean out the gunk, make sure it's clean. Also, you know, you've got to make sure that the hole in the side of the bar is clean where the oil comes out, to make sure that where the oil is distributed, it's not clogged up with gunk, because then you're not going to get any oil on the chain. And you can tell whether or not it's running properly, because after you've started the chainsaw, you rev it up a lot and put it on full, and then just point it at that log, and you'll see after 10-15 seconds, you'll see a line of oil starting to show up or appear on that log, and that tells you that at least it's distributing oil. The other thing I also learned about these chainsaws is your better made chainsaws are engineered so that you basically, as you use your gas, you use your oil. So when you run out of gas, you should be able to open up your oil reservoir and you'll see that they're both low the same, because they're basically engineered so that as you're using gas, the oil is being used at the same time. So the reservoirs are, correctly sized to make sure that you're filling up both at the same time, and that's a good indicator that you're getting the right amount of oil on your bar and that the chainsaw is running the way it's supposed to. Plus the fact that if you're in there and you're forcing the bar through the wood, you're going to find that the bar heats up very quickly and you can actually see smoke coming off the bar while you're trying to cut the tree. So hopefully those indicators, those are things that I've learned so far and that people have taught me, and I hope they're helpful for you. So let's get this thing together. I want to head up the driveway, and I've sharpened it. I want to see how it works on the poplar and see if I'm getting chips or sawdust, and see if I've, hopefully after all this time, figured out how to sharpen it properly. All right, cheers. Okay, well, there is no chance I'm going to try to take that thing down, especially not without my neighbor guy or some assistance, somebody that knows how to do it better than me. But I've got a couple of big limbs that I can cut back at least and get it off the road for now, and then just grapple up the branches and leave them, and then we'll get back at them, and at least we'll be able to get through okay. Good test. It looks like I found the right sharpener for the tool. That STIHL 2-in-1 sharpener was super easy. It worked great, and I realize now from the last tree video, that was just like butter. The chainsaw is sharp. It actually pulls itself through the wood, and you don't realize, I guess, sometimes when it starts to get dull how much extra work you're doing, because you just naturally start pushing. But she chunk that all up with no effort whatsoever. So I think the STIHL 2-in-1 was worth the 40 bucks, so I'm happy I got it. I'm just going to grapple this stuff out, get it out of the way, and I hope that the video has been helpful for some folks, especially new chainsaw folks like myself. And for you experts or the people that have been doing it a long time, I'd love to hear some comments, any other suggestions or advice to help make it a little bit safer for the rest of us. We had Canada Day here just this week, and I know that tomorrow's a big day, so I just wanted to say Happy Independence Day to all of the subscribers and friends down in the U.S. I hope you have a wonderful time. Thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate it. Hope it was helpful. If you like the channel, please hit subscribe, hit the like button, and if you want to know when I'm posting videos, just click the little bell. I'm going to grapple this up and head out. Enjoy the rest of the week, and all the best. Cheers.